Hello and welcome to the Stateside Soccer Show. My name is Jordan. With me today is Logan. How are you today, Logan?
Uh, couldn't be handsome. Couldn't be handsomer, Jordan. Is that a word? Handsomer.
More
I
handsome?
more handsome.
Are you saying you couldn't
No,
be more
Jordan.
handsome or the day couldn't
You
be
couldn't
more
be. No,
me?
you couldn't be.
Oh,
Yeah, you
okay.
couldn't be more handsome,
Thank
Jordan.
you.
So it's a good day. Any day that I can see you.
I think I could
I
be
think
more
I.
handsome,
Well, I
but
mean that's
I'll take the
debatable.
compliment.
Yeah, I'm just shooting some compliments at you today. You look handsome, Jordan.
Thank you.
Looking good.
Thank you.
So always a good day whenever Jordan Wiegand and I are on the pod together. So
Yeah, talking some soccer. Uh we have some big storylines to talk about that we'll kind of dive into throughout here. And then we'll, of course, just kind of recap the week of Major League Soccer and look ahead to the next week. All right, so I guess let's start with Sunday night soccer, right? We had Miami and Atlanta in a rematch from the uh, first round of the playoffs last year, where Atlanta had the upset. But Miami is the one that wins this match. Fafa Picault with the late goal. A really good header to head it down, and it just kind of got right in the corner where Guzan couldn't reach it in time. We also had a nice Messi chip at the beginning of the game after Atlanta took the lead like 10 minutes in. Messi comes back and scores in the first, I think it was the first half. And then, 1-1 at half. And then here comes Fafa Picault late in the game, giving Miami the lead away from home in Atlanta. Is this, as our thumbnail is going to ask, the best rivalry in Major League Soccer? We talked a little bit ago about how Messi actually needs maybe for his Miami team to have that kind of roadblock, that sort of uh, rivalry, the way Barca and Madrid have. We have El Trafico, we have Hell is Real, we have Hudson River Derby, we have all these rivalries in Major League Soccer. But is this Cascadia, but is this right now the best one?
yeah, I mean, I think if you look around the league and the direction of these two clubs, I think that this might be number one, especially this year. Hell is Real, I think, has taken that gauntlet in past years. I do feel like LAFC and LA Galaxy had kind of taken a back seat just because Galaxy weren't as good. But then last year, Galaxy run the table and won MLS Cup. Um, with them not performing as well this year, with Columbus kind of taking a little bit of a step back, with Cincinnati kind of regressing here early. I feel like Jordan, this is the Atlanta was seen as the darling of the transfer window, bringing back different pieces like Almiron, and you bring in Latte Lath, and you bring in a whole slew of good signings over the last couple of transfer windows that they've got. They've got Ronnie Dyla. They have the best support, I guess, in the whole league. So, and then you and I texted about this, where I feel like just overall atmosphere, I think Mercedes Benz probably gives you the most between them and probably St. Louis give you the most European feel that I think that many will compare MLS always to the European leagues and the fan base behind them and the crowds that they get. And I think Mercedes Benz, just because of how big it is and how much they sell out that game or those games with Atlanta United, I feel like this is what we need in MLS is somebody to kind of go up against some of these giants. And I feel like Atlanta could build something like that. And I think with proximity, I think they're close enough between Atlanta and Miami that I think it presents a unique rivalry, but a one that I think exists in other sports. Um, for instance, you got the Marlins, you got the Braves, not typically seen as rivals, but I think definitely divisional rivals. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is as close as we get to, uh, I think, an Eastern Conference rival that goes up against El Trafico.
I can't say that it's the best rivalry, but what I can say is that this is what was needed like we talked about with Messi and Miami, but also what's needed in the South. We haven't really had in the South soccer scene since these clubs have joined in a really big rival. At times, Atlanta, Orlando had that, but it kind of felt half-hearted. This is like, you know, I think for a rivalry, you also can't have a team that wins constantly, which is kind of like the Hudson River Derby. A lot of the times it was the Red Bulls winning that. It's kind of evened out, I think, a little bit more lately. But when you have this, where like Atlanta got the better half in the playoffs, and now Miami's here getting a game away from home. I've seen some people say it is their revenge tour for that. I'm sorry, this is not a revenge game because playoffs are not at stake. I like if I'm Atlanta, it's like cool, you beat us in the regular season, congrats. Like see us in the playoffs, you know. But it is what the South needed. I thought maybe we would have got that more with Inter and Orlando, but Atlanta and Inter have been able to have those meaningful games in the playoffs. So they're, and then now in this game, it was a big game. Messi returns back to the lineup. It's in Mercedes Benz, like you said, really great atmosphere. Guzan standing on his head for a lot of these type of games. The early lead by Atlanta, those are the type of things that help build that up a bit more. And I would be I'm really intrigued to see the next time these two face off what the vibe's like, because I mean, it felt like a rivalry game. It was a really good Sunday night soccer game to pick, right? Like this is what Sunday night soccer is supposed to be. Last year this game gets buried away at 7:30 probably, and everybody's watching their own team, but everybody on our Twitter feed and stuff was on watching Sunday night soccer, watching this game, talking about what a great game it was, because it was a really great match. And, just absolutely exactly what we needed. I just wish, we can maybe get it outside of the Apple box as well, for people out there to really draw in interest. But, can only do what we can do. But I thought it was a really great game, and it's been great seeing this rival. I'm not sure if I can even say about how it is with Hell is Real yet, because I feel like since he's been struggling, Crew's not where they are. I mean, Atlanta's been struggling too, right? But definitely the premier rival in the southeast of the states right now.
Yeah, no, all good points. I do just think that Atlanta United, as time has gone on, as Garth Lagerwey's put his stamp on this team, you're starting to see, I think, what you kind of saw with Seattle. I think Atlanta can reach that level where Seattle dominated for so long in the Western Conference. I think you could see that, or a resemblance of what that team was in Seattle with the team that is currently being constructed. And you got to remember that too, is like these guys haven't played a full 5 games yet, handful of games. So I think there's a lot of things that Latte Lat. There was a point where it was 2-0 before that was called back offside.
Yes, very close,
And
very close
yeah,
offsides.
and then we're talking about a whole different thing maybe. So um, I think there's still some growth for Atlanta United. I still think there's some growth for Miami. I don't think Miami defends well. So I think there's a lot of growth. This is early in the season. Like you said, Jordan, I'd be interested to kind of key into the next match, which I think we could probably look that up of when it is. But um, I imagine that it'll be sharper just because of depending on when they play each other again, what that'll look like. As long as it's not in those summer months when you start to see some of these guys like head out for international break.
Yeah, I'm assuming it won't be because like I could be wrong, but Miami is going to be in the Club World Cup, so I feel like they're going to have some games rescheduled, right? So
Yeah,
like if it was in the summer, could get moved. I would assume this is almost going to be like even let's say next year, a decision day type of matchup if they haven't already scheduled it for decision day. Like that
yeah.
to me seems like where we could end up with that.
June 28th is their next matchup.
June 28th. Okay, like 2 days after my birthday. That's during the
Yeah,
Club
I was
World
gonna
Cup
say
though. So like I don't know how they're going to
that'll
do that.
probably
They're going to have to reschedule, I would think. Depending if they move on. If Miami doesn't move on, which
right.
at that time the group stage is done, I guess it could.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about some bad news we have here with Seattle's injuries. Areola got diagnosed with the ACL tear, so he's going to miss, you would expect, the whole season, right?
Yeah,
Jordan Morris, hamstring for 4 to 6 weeks. We have Pedro out for a quad 4 to 6 weeks. Yamar out versus St. Louis City due to personal reasons. I think I even saw Brian Schmetzer was ill leading up to
yeah.
this game. So, not a good look for a team that we thought was maybe gonna get that splash and maybe be up in the top of the West. They're 10th, right? They're 3 points away from fifth, so they can still turn this around. But when you're talking about those type of injuries, especially as somebody as important as like Jordan Morris, right? Areola's a new player onto the team. They can maybe readjust with that. But when you're missing like Jordan Morris for 4 to 6 weeks, that's going to be a little rough.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about getting fully back into fitness. You're talking about almost 2 months and a half, like depending. So it just it seriously hurts them to not have these guys. And you and I talked about this last year, where they had an aging roster. They go out and make really good moves for Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola, who are really good players in this league and people that you and I thought could propel them as being one of the contenders for MLS Cup. Jordan, I'd go as far as to say they're not even close to contenders now at this point. Like that's a huge loss. That's significant. I could see them, bouncing back. They are only 10th, and you do, again, like you said, they do have just 3 points separating them from the top of the half of that table. But I just there it becomes a point where like these injuries just start to mount, and it doesn't help that these guys are getting older. I mean, this is an aging roster still. It's not like they've infused this thing with a huge like amount of youngsters. They do play some of their youngsters, but again, it's a totally different game from Sounders to MLS matches. So um, major concern, I think, and a window that was pretty tight is now getting even tighter. And I just don't know how they compete going forward with all of these injuries. And if they continue to drop like this, I could see this becoming a huge problem for Seattle, especially as we head into the summer.
Yeah, it's somebody that I think this is a team that can't get ruled out, right? Like I feel like they, as last year, they started off slow, crept up the table. It just is a bummer starting off the season like this after they get that big win against LAFC and then injuries, right? Like that is a what a deflating feeling after beating uh one of your rivals like that. So yeah, because that happened in like I think the CCC game where you had the Morris and Areola injuries. So that's tough. But they do sit 10th with 4 points. It's still very early days, right? We'll see how it goes from there. Let's go ahead and move on to Vancouver, one of the other Cascadian Cup teams here, who have the best start in their club history. 4 wins, no draws, no losses, and perfect 12 points so far. 9 goals scored, only given up 2. That's a 7 goal differential. 4 of those, the 4 games, 2 of them at home, 2 of them away. So they've been pretty symmetrical here. 2 wins on the road, 2 wins at home. Are they for real, Logan?
Yeah, I can't help but buy it. Like I at this point they're down their best player, which I thought was going to be a big difference, but they've proven to be resilient. I think with him only being out for a couple of weeks, I think it helps them gain momentum when he does come back. And what momentum do they need? I mean, it's at this point they've got a +7 goal differential. They've scored 9. They've only let up 2, Jordan, and Vancouver's always had a tough time defending. So the fact that they're keeping teams off the score sheet, I mean, that's a tremendous improvement. And again, like Vancouver, if you follow this league, and maybe you don't follow Vancouver because eventually at the end of the year they end up in one of the last playoff spots. But Jordan, it seems like we always have a moment or a stretch of season where we're talking about the Vancouver Whitecaps and what they could become. Um, and I think finally this year, I think they're putting together their most impressive win with the ability to go in and make some noise in CONCACAF Champions Cup against a Monterrey team who's been one of the best Mexican sides for a very long time. Um, to then come to MLS while you're also, and we've seen this too, Jordan, where MLS clubs do not balance well between CONCACAF Champions Cup and MLS, but Vancouver's, I mean, passing everything with flying colors. So this is a tremendous feat for a team that I think a lot of people probably overlooked, but definitely something that we got to look forward to going forward. 12 points, Jordan. Like, I think once they start to hit 15 and 18 points, I think they're pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot based off of the history of people that have started off
Yeah,
that
it'd be a
well.
momentous collapse if not, because
Right.
like a playoff
Yeah.
spot is 50 points,
Right.
right? So, like guaranteed, you're at 12. You are more than a fifth of the way after 4 games
Yeah. That's
to
crazy.
a guaranteed playoff spot, right? So, I mean, that's I'll actually look at some of the stats from last year, but on what it takes to be there. But yeah, they're like the seventh club to do it, and I think it said the second club since like t- either way, two of the most recent clubs to have done this were recently, and then the rest of the clubs were like in the past. Like we're talking further, like 10 years, five to 10 years ago. Um, for those other those other five clubs, these two clubs, Vancouver. I forget the other team that it did it. Was it St. Louis or um,
Yeah. It was St. Louis. Yeah.
who started off that hot? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, pretty good. Like you said, they also moved past Monterrey. Um, while some of these other MLS clubs haven't been able to do it, I think the issue when you talk about CCC, I know people are always going to talk about the time of year it is. I don't think that's as big as a deal as the depth of the squad, right? Because we have things like DPs, the young DPs, GAM, TAM, you can spend big on a player for DPs, but you're only able to spend on 3 players for the DP, right? And then that doesn't count towards your cap. And then you have to spend your cap on like the rest of the surrounding team. And it's hard to do that. I think they need to raise the cap, and I think they need to raise how many senior spots there are on a roster. I think that is something like if you look at Europe can have big squads while MLS does not. So you got to raise the cap and raise the spots that the number of spots on a senior squad to be able to, I think, to really challenge with teams down in Mexico during CONCACAF Champions Cup. We have a lot going for us during Leagues Cup most of the time. You know, Mexico has everything kind of going towards their advantage during CCC. So it kind of balances out. But that's the biggest thing for me. But yeah, Vancouver, I was not like I don't know where I put them at the beginning of the season. I was not huge on them because of like the turnover manager wise. I put them 12th. That's going to age very bad. That would be a disaster for them to finish 12th right now. So look, I'm already able to say I was wrong about a certain prediction. But last year, if I'm looking back at the lowest playoff spot points in the West, was Vancouver with 47. So they're already at 12, which means they would only need 35 more to reach that. Now, that was a wild card spot. Obviously, they want better than a wild card spot. That's 50 points exactly in the West from the Rapids. So They only have to get, what is that, like 38 more points. That's, I mean, how many points per game do you got to get 38? Let's see, 38 points divided by how many games are left for them?
30?
Should be 30, right? Don't we have 34
Yeah.
games?
Yeah.
So you have to get 1.2 points per match.
Which is very doable.
That is very doable. So they're looking pretty good. Okay. They're looking pretty good this early in the season.
And with all the big giants, I mean, coming out of a slumber to try to get on the right track, like this is a good time for a lot of these clubs. And maybe that's something we can cover at the end of the show. But I mean, if you look at the Western Conference, it's not who you'd expect to be there. It
No,
is
look,
not.
standings. We have Vancouver, San Diego, St. Louis, Colorado is the top four. Minnesota's in
Yeah.
5, San Jose's in 6, Austin's in 7.
So there's,
We don't get to the big guns until
I was going to
LAFC
say the
in eighth
playoff
place.
teams are all below that seventh
This is how it
spot.
started last year, though, I think, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a bit where we're
Yeah.
like, none of the playoff teams in the West are
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
playoff?
Yes.
And then it just,
Yep.
because for a while,
Flipped.
Galaxy was the leading one, and they had missed the playoffs the year before. So there was like
Yeah.
a funny bit there, and it then shook out. It shook itself out. But we're starting to see some leads here that I think are a little bigger. San Diego with 8 points already, St. Louis with 8
Mm-hmm.
points. When you have teams like Houston and LA and SKC with 1 point, right? 7-point swing there that you would have to try to overcome. But it is still very early. Still very early. Okay, let's dive into this is the topic I really want to talk about. So LAFC is struggling, but Olivier Giroud is probably the biggest one who is struggling. And I feel bad because I was kind of rooting against him scoring this week because I was like, we didn't get to talk about this last week, so hopefully we can still talk about it this week. But Giroud,
Yikes.
one of my favorite players, he was on Chelsea. I loved him when he was at Arsenal as well. Since 2019, no striker has played more minutes, 965 without a goal in MLS play. Now, of course, he has scored in, I think, a Champions Cup game. He scored in an Open Cup match or whatever. So I think he's got like 2 or 3 goals, but not in league play. And, a lot of people pointing the finger at what a bad signing this is, blah, 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 blah. Can it actually be a bad sign? Like, what are the warning signs here? Because he was actually still producing at AC Milan, which is a higher level than MLS. Him, Pulisic, and like Loftus Cheek, all of them over there, the Chelsea castoffs, were playing hell of a time over in Milan. Giroud comes over here. We're thinking he's gonna hit the ground running if he's doing it in Milan. Why isn't it working in LA? And was there any signs to be like, hey, I think a lot of times people say you can't sign like a 32, 35-year-old striker to come over, blah, 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 blah. But it's worked in the past. Again, he was actually being productive. So I'm just kind of wondering where it all went.
I mean, there's this idea too of like when guys come over, if there's somebody that occupies a similar space in which they do, I think that's another thing too. You got to look at the system in which he's playing in, and maybe that old of a striker is not really suited to play with LAFC. Like they typically tend to stick to guys that are a little bit younger. Um, Denny Bouanga is their goal scorer. Last year you had Bogusz, who was carrying a heavy load and scoring a lot of goals. He had 15. I think you become a victim of having too many goal scorers at times. And I think if you watch Olivier Giroud relied heavily on getting balls that dropped in the box a lot. Like he's not somebody that's going to take off and create his own stuff. Um, I'd almost compare it to Luis Muriel for Orlando. He played more of a centralized role, almost like a second striker behind Duncan McGuire until they figured out Martin Ojeda can play a really good number 10. And then they moved Muriel to the bench, and then he became more of a bench piece. I think that's the same thing you're going to see with Olivier. Like, I think it'll take him time to learn it. But again, he's an older guy. So there's so much to MLS that's fit based. more so than I think some of the European leagues, because I feel like a lot of the European leagues are possession based teams that do a lot of the same things. Like they're very similar. Whereas I feel like MLS is just a whole different kind of a level of a game that I just don't know if it translates very well to European players who have played in Europe their whole life. Like it's a very difficult. It's why you don't see a lot of the European players come over and just light the league on fire. You've got the specific ones that have, but if you think back to the history of it, Jordan, I don't. It's hard to say that they've had a tremendous success coming over here from Europe when they've played there their whole life. Like you've got what Beckham, you've got Ibrahimovic, you've got uh, Messi, obviously. Um, Suarez has played European, but like the list is not exceptional. Christian Benzeke. Um,
You keep
but
adding
you look at like
names.
yeah, but like if you go Insigne, if you go Bernadeschi, if you go Gareth Bale, if you go like there's a lot
hey,
of people that
hey,
have come over and just gotten flattened.
Bale won MLS Cup for them, by the way.
One goal, and then what? No, not one goal, but you know what I mean? Like I just feel like just because you played in Europe doesn't mean you're gonna have success in MLS. Like that's just not how it works.
No, but I think like when you look at it, and I just went on FBref and looking at, I was like, okay, how many goals did he score? On the before he came over, right? He had scored 15 goals uh for AC Milan, which was the second highest since he was on Arsenal when he scored 16 in one season. So again, he was being really productive at the age of 36. He's now 38. I think that probably plays a little bit of a role in this as well, but that's a really quick drop off. That's why I'm sitting here wondering, like, I know there was people out there thinking, I seen it. I seen it when he was getting signed. People were kind of like, this is a wrong move. And I'm wondering how you can come to that when he was still being very productive. I'm still trying to figure out where we're getting 900 some minutes from. I'm guessing the playoffs in Leagues
Yes.
Cup because it's been only
Yes.
700 some minutes league play. And he's started 7 games last year and he started 1 game this year. So he's played 114 minutes this year. So I can't even put it too much on him. He came in. This is kind of the year where I feel like we might be saying it too early for him. We'll see if it continues playing out like this. Who knows? But here's the thing: they have other options, so they're not leaning on Giroud to really be the one. So he may not get as many chances. That's probably going to play a role in it too. But like last year, he comes in at the summer transfer window, and you're thinking, okay, he might. Sometimes they don't adapt right then, right? Like we've seen that before with players where they come over, they have an awful first half of their MLS career, and then turn it on this season. I feel like I'm starting to just see a lot of Giroud posts this season about it, and it's really only been 4 games. He's played 3, started 1. So I'm not ready to really sound the alarm, but like it's a little disappointing because I think on this podcast we were saying he should be a really good signing. I think I said he would be more relevant than the Marco Royce signing. In fact, they've both been equally as relevant, essentially. They haven't, Marco hasn't really done much as well, right? So like that is where we're like I think it was from this week where I think Twelman had posted the video on like Marco Royce just standing there while a teammate's taking a shot and he's like not moving for him or anything, just standing in the box watching. That's not a great look either. But these are players that have been still producing at the highest level. Giroud in that onside documentary saying, I'm not here to retire. I'm here to still play and win stuff. I don't know if that's what Marco Royce is thinking, right? But like, is it just saying the right stuff to us or is it just being unlucky? Giroux is usually somebody that really needs the service into him, right? Like, I feel like he plays differently than how LAFC actually plays.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
creators. Yeah,
So I feel like that's going to be a tough
they're
thing for him too. If he went somewhere like
yeah.
a, uh,
Well, like Orlando,
yeah,
like seriously, Orlando is much more of a they need somebody at the end of the ball. They just dunk. That's what Duncan is. Duncan doesn't create. Like that's who Orlando is. They play from the wings. But I do feel like yeah, you make a good point. I think LAFC is run, 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 gun, and create your own by just being really good. Like that's what Denny Bouanga is so good at is creating his own. So again, and Denny Bouanga, and that's another thing. If you play beside a player that is the number one option, you quickly become a number two option. Like doesn't matter how you look at it. Like you can be at 1A, 1B. He's going to get his, and I don't know. I'm looking at Luis Muriel's numbers right now. 37 games played so far. He's got 6 goals. He only had 5 last year in 33. So it's small sample size for Giroux. But again, Jordan, I think that's another problem that maybe it becomes more of a problem as more guys start to come over. Is a lot of these guys that are on the edge of their career are heading to good destinations like LA, and that LA system doesn't fit everybody.
kind of something I wanted to bring up too, because I was watching On Side in that episode
Yeah,
recently, and I really liked Charlotte, and I really fell in love with their GM and their coach, and how, you know, Dean Smith didn't want to come over here essentially, but Z was like, "Hey, I don't take no for an answer," and just kept like talking with them, and it worked out. And that's kind of how he had it with Marco Royce. But the main thing, right? Marco Royce took less to live in LA. He doesn't, and as their GM said, I couldn't tell you where Charlotte was on a map before
yeah,
I took this job. And Dean Smith says the same thing essentially. And I think, Westwood said the same thing as well. Like, it is, people don't think of the Carolinas, right? They even said they think of LA, Miami, New York,
Atlanta,
Atlanta. That's pretty much it,
Chicago.
right? Like,
Yeah,
those are the cities people know of
yeah,
overseas. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here, where you're going to have some of these aging European stars who do want to come over here, but will only, as they've been doing, want to limit themselves to
yeah,
LA, Miami, New York. And
yeah. Jordan, Kevin De Bruyne is not picking up his crap and going to Columbus, Ohio.
right,
He's
right.
like, that's where I want to go.
But when you do have the players that, so what happens is they're either going to start getting sidelined, like Giroux is, where he's only played like 13 regular season games, right? Because you have better options who are actually integrated into the team, or eventually they're going to stop coming over here and go to like Saudi or something, right? Like, which is we've seen a little bit at times as well. But you do have some players, uh, like Westwood, who came over from, Burnley and Aston Villa, comes over here and he says in that episode, "I want to have a legacy here in Charlotte. It's a fun project to be a part of." If you can get a player like that on board, like Charlotte has, in these teams where people want to live in the States, but maybe not, are not as set on those other big cities. And that's the thing too. Like, he was not a big player overseas the way Giroux or Marco Royce was, right? Like, he was pretty much bottom, mid-table Premier League player, comes over and wants to win stuff at Charlotte. And I think that makes him a great candidate for those type of targeting. And you're seeing that with Zaha, who comes over, right, and is playing at Charlotte. And then you also have, um, players like Latte Lath, who goes to Atlanta, right? And now they had to probably spend some money on that. But the thing is, these players should also want to go to these type of cities too, because one, they'll become like immediately the biggest guy there when it comes to the team. But two, cost of living in like Charlotte is way less than cost of living in Miami or LA or whatever. So you can have a bigger house. You can have like a really nice area
Better
to
learn
live in.
better learn Texas, LA fans.
Yeah.
It's like their players are like, what? How much? Um, yeah, it is interesting though. Like you made a really good point. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, that so like it is almost like it's identical with the way that if you took all of our MLS teams and put them in one table like the Premier League. Like the table that like so Crystal Palace, I'd say that's pretty equivalent to like somebody like a Charlotte,
Yeah, yeah.
where it's like that tier of player. I think that's interesting because it would like you'd probably have more success convincing somebody from like a Crystal Palace or a Brentford or something like that to go and play in you know Columbus or Cincinnati or Texas or
The
so.
biggest thing they did with Charlotte, I feel like, is getting Dean Smith on board lately, because that will add credibility to getting those type of players
Yeah.
over here, like Zaha. I'm sure that played a role, right? In the sense of, however he convinced him to come over, because he had other job options. He said overseas, but it was something about this
Oh
type of
yeah.
job that made him want to do it, and talk to his family and move over here. And now, he I'm sure that played a role in getting Zaha over here and why they look so good. They've been a team that has what, like, one loss, and it was, of course, to Miami, but otherwise Charlotte's looked pretty sharp. 7 points in the first 4 games, 2 wins, a loss, and a draw. And that's a team I was wrong about. I said, you did it last year, show me you can do it again this year. So far they're on track for that, so I'm going to end up probably eating my words. But more of a believer in them after that episode. So and then later that day they took a 2-0 lead over Cincy, and I'm like, all right. And that kind of transitions us to our next topic here of FC Cincinnati, who is continuing to struggle here. They got the win against Toronto, and then they lose against Charlotte here. And, you know, they have 6 points. So obviously they've had 2 wins. It's not all bad, but that loss against the Union was kind of deflating with how many goals they gave up. And at this point, they actually have a negative goal differential as they sit 8th place with 6 points. -2 goal differential. They have not won away from home. They have 2 home wins, 0 road wins, and 2 away losses is where they currently sit. Is it just the loss of Lucho and trying to get this front, the spine of the team, the front three, playing together for the first time? Or is there maybe something else that we should be worried about with Cincy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one day, like you said, the chemistry of the team. It's so hard to bring in a new 10 and expect it to go off without a hitch. I mean, the 10 is the most pivotal position, I believe, on a pitch, is just because they are the talisman, they're the creator. Whenever I've liked really good teams, it's because they've had a really good number 10. And the 10 will take you as far as, I mean, look at what Lucho does, right? I mean, it's just, he can expand the game in so many ways, and I think Evander gets to that point. Jordan, I think a couple things like defensively, I don't think they're as sharp as they once were. So they'll have to correct some of those issues, and a lot of it's been because of injury, and just kind of an ever-changing back line that they keep trying to make a little bit of improvements. I feel like they're always trying to make slight improvements back there, keeping some of the key guys in place, but also changing out some of theirs, like they did over in the offseason. Another thing too is I was looking at this and because I was interested, right? I was like, why is Cincinnati really struggling, and what could be a hindrance to them propelling themselves forward in this league and then competing against Miami? And honestly, I was looking at it. Danke, he's only had one season where he's gone absolutely wild in goals scored, and that was 2023 and 2024 at Circa Bruges, which was in the Belgian Pro
Mm-hmm.
League. He had 22 goals last year, and I probably I'm guessing because of injury, because he's not played as many games. He only had 10 goals. Now that was in 17 matches. That's an
That
insane
is.
clip. But it's also like the years before that, he was younger, so he's obviously, but years before that, Jordan, he was playing 32 matches and he was scoring 9 goals. So it's like he's still young. I think there's some of that where it's like he's still trying to figure out exactly who he is. He's got to learn a new league. you know, Top goal scorers. I mean, if you're really one of the top goal scorers, you're shooting for that 20 mark. Um, that could be something I think to watch. I think he was on a good pace to start the season. He's kind of tapered off here a little bit, and that's expected. He's younger, and you're not going to score every game. So that's just something that I was like, maybe that's somebody to watch too. Is he's going to take the team as far as he can too. But that also might come with the fact that like if he's scoring 10 to 15 goals, that's not good enough to be one of the top goal scorers in the league. So we'll see. But I just think there's so many chemistry things going on with them, and they need another creator. Like they just do. I feel like they're lacking another good player in the attacking third. They can't. I don't think you can rely heavily on Evander and Kevin Danke as they try to learn the league.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll see how it goes for them. It's a tough situation when you're looking at Cincinnati and losing Lucho mainly because he wanted to leave, right? And then you have to go get somebody else. Um, you go and get Evander, who of course was really great last year, MVP pace over for Portland, and he did pretty well over um, uh, to start the season. But the thing is, they haven't really been like playing all together. It's going to take a bit for them to get really going. He had what 7 shots it looks like, and 5 scoring, 5 on target shots when we were looking at um, Cincinnati. Evander and Kubo had the best XG for Cincinnati, and actually had some of the best XG on the whole game if you're looking at like these advanced stats. But um, we'll see how it goes. 88% passing percentage from Evander as well, so he's doing what he can. But like you said, Denke had 1 shot, which was a .02 xG. So not really some great connections there as of yet, but we'll see how it goes for them. I'm not worried about Cincy as it currently stands. It's just tough. These are also road games for them that they've lost, which is not rare to lose in MLS. So we'll just keep an eye on them. But Charlotte starting off pretty well. We'll see where they go from here as well. We have the Philadelphia Union lost their first match of the season. So I want to talk about this as well, of course. I think people have listened to us enough by now that knows that I am not very biased when it comes to calls. You can probably attest as we're sitting in the stands last year, if there was things that were controversial, I was, very
Yeah,
even.
you were rooting for RSL. It's really weird. I
I
thought you were
went
a
so
Union
far the
fan.
other way just to make it seem like I'm
Yeah,
not
it
biased.
was really awkward
Uh,
when the Union players are looking back at the guy painted like a Union ball. It's like, what are you doing, man?
but I've
But
I've
yes, you
been
are.
there in games where like the fans are like, "That's a penalty." I'm like, it's not a penalty. Okay, there were some really rough calls in this game. Okay, the ref loses all control. I feel like when he doesn't call that penalty for the Union, it created frustration for the Union players. Then they call that penalty for the other team, and then it becomes a real issue where uh, fans are throwing stuff on the field, which they shouldn't do, but they were hot dogs. So maybe grab one if you're a player, eat it, right? That would have been really iconic.
That's the best thing to throw is
That
food.
would have been
Let's not throw
iconic.
beer. Yeah,
Mukhtar just picks
it
one
would
up
have
and
been.
starts munching on a hot dog. I would
Yeah,
be like, hell yeah,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, don't throw things. And then after that, it starts just players are getting chippy, the tackles are wild, and then you have a player throwing a ball at another player, getting a red card. Like this game had everything. I saw some Nashville fans who were not as unbiased, I guess you would say, because I saw some say that the first one was clearly not a penalty when I'm seeing actual professionals like Sasha Kleshton and Taylor Twellman saying that that is 100% a penalty. I don't see how it's not a penalty, honestly, because when they take out Quinn Sullivan, they don't get the ball at all, and they literally take him out. The only way I can think it's not a penalty is that they're saying he's going away from goal. and it's not a clear goal scoring opportunity, but it is a foul. So I feel like that would be a penalty. I don't know. What was your thoughts on this non-call here?
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with everyone that was very vocal. Like you said, it doesn't make any sense. The whole I don't like. I don't even really like it's not a goal scoring opportunity, but you're fouled in the box, and then like, okay, where do you put the ball then? Like, where are you taking that free kick from? So, yeah, no, this is all it was all wrong. And then, like you said, Jordan, as it does when something like this happens, the home crowd gets into it. I like you have to be a consummate professional to not allow outside influence during a game. And I think there are times where, and they're human, and we would all probably do the same thing, where you react to something based off how you're feeling and how somebody's reacted to how you've called a game. I guarantee you there has been multiple times where, as professional as you wanted to be for the refs, you're not as professional because you're spiteful of something that they're booing you for or throwing stuff at you for. Like, it becomes a human element, and we're not all perfect, and there probably are mistakes made. This was a mistake that was made. I think the refs allowed it to get out of hand and then try to reel it back in. By reeling it back in, they're now awarding the wrong team. Like, it didn't feel like it was ever going to get back into the union's favor after that all went down. Like, you could just feel the momentum shift because it became more about what the refs were doing than what the game was actually doing. So
And it's not
that
a
never ends
look,
well.
and I'll clarify too. It's not a guarantee this becomes 2-2 because of
No,
they save a penalty
right.
later on. So obviously, Willis is a really great goalkeeper. It could have stayed. It could have stayed 2-1, but it's a penalty. It's a penalty no matter whose team it is or tackle it is. I'm not so sure about the. Also, I will say to take that long looking at it and then come back and say no penalty, I'm really baffled by. I thought the reason it was taking that long is because they were like, "Oh crap, yeah, this is a penalty." Okay, the next penalty that gets called is almost immediately after. I don't know. It felt like immediately after, and I literally turned to my wife and I was like, "They're going to call this one. They're going to go to VAR. They're going to call this one." And yes, do they collide? It's a very 50-50 ball. I don't really see how this is a penalty uh, at all. But this is what kind of buried the Union here. They'll get another penalty later that is way too little, too late for the Union, and it's saved anyway. So, did you have any strong thoughts on the Nashville penalty?
I agree. Not one. Like, I don't know. And again, I've got no skin in the game.
Yeah, he hates
Um
us.
yeah, I can't stand you guys. Unbelievable, you Philadelphians. Yeah, no, I it was really bad. Like, bad enough to where I was like, "Oh, there's gonna be some fines because some players are gonna come out and say something." I didn't follow up whether they did, but, like, it felt egregious. So I'm assuming there's somebody in that locker room that go, "You know what? I get paid enough, I'm gonna say something." Because that's oftentimes what happens in sports is the guy that's getting paid the most or the head coach will come out and say that everything that happened was the ref's fault, and it was ridiculous. So, you know what, Jordan? That was a perfect. You know whose moment that was perfectly made for? Jim Curtin. that was a that was so made for Jim to come in and say, "Yeah, that was awful. I don't know
Yeah,
what they're
because he's
looking at."
usually very open about that.
Very
So that would have
candid. Yeah,
been great. I didn't get to see what Carnell said, but
I didn't either.
I mean, and look, it's not like I'm saying it's fixed or anything. These refs sometimes just make bad calls. I've seen it in games that do not have high stakes like this. I'm sure I've played in rec softball where I felt like the ump is calling a really bad game for our team and favoring the other team. And there is nothing at stake in rec softball leagues for like over 18-year-olds. Like there's nothing at stake here, but I found it very frustrating. I can see how players do that, get paid professionally for this because I'm spending my Sundays out there and get a bad strike call or a really bad out call, and I'm like ready to throw some hands, and I'm like, hey, nothing is that serious, but just wild on how that went. I don't get it. I think we need to definitely raise the stakes when it comes to refereeing in this. I don't mean like like we have to raise the bar for refereeing in this country, in this league. I
Yes.
don't understand why we're settling for this, why we have VAR if this is the stuff that's going to get looked at and overturned because or not changed at all in the case of the first penalty. Because I mean, like I said, most people that are scrolling around or
Right.
that were neutral, that are professionals in this field, said those two are not penalties. Why are we doing this? I know it's subjective having a referee and stuff, but it just doesn't make any sense.
I've gotten to the point because there's been something that's happened in basketball that was awful with the Pistons. I don't even like the Pistons, and it happened to them. And I totally agree with the coach. There needs to be a checks and balances in place. Like there needs to be transparency. There needs to be somebody that comes out, a governing body, that their sole purpose is to exist to not discipline the refs, but go and say this was wrong. Like you're off this game, whatever it might be. Like I guess it is disciplining, but like in a way, it's like having a boss in any other job. Like, hey, you're not doing that right. Let's get better. There never seems to be that because for some reason I get it. Sports fans are crazy and they'll do stupid things to people, but like there's got to be some kind of system where we can say, you know, this ref got this wrong and we're going to penalize them if this continues to be a trend. Like, take them off games. Don't, fine them like they fine players.
Fine
Like,
them,
it just,
exactly. Now,
yeah,
here's the thing:
it
they probably
doesn't
don't
make
get made
sense.
enough to really get
No.
fined, but there has to be something. And this is in all sports across the country. Like I said,
Yes.
there's issues with baseball umps and all that where they
Yes.
just don't get. We kind of get gaslit after the game by either the league, either just being we apologize. That was a bad call. How many times did the NFL do
Yes.
that? And it's like,
All the time.
okay, so what do
Yep.
you do about it? Oh, nothing. There's the
Right.
other team's still going through. It's like, okay, well, I
The
don't.
ref will be back
And the
next
ref's
week.
back next week. Okay,
Yeah.
same thing here. Of like, you know, uh, where the league might come out at times and be like, oh no, that was the right call. Like we had that with again with the playoffs when we had certain people saying something Mahomes did, like a late hit on Mahomes wasn't a late hit because it was not a late hit. He slid late, right? But then everybody after that, the league is starting to gaslight us into being like, no, it was actually the right call. They did a great job with that. And I'm like, everybody with their eyes can see that that was not the right call by the intent of the law. Same kind of stuff with this. Hopefully it gets better, but I don't know. Um, but I will say Nashville played very, very well. This was one of the first times I saw the Union defense this season look really not great. Um, that first goal by Surridge was, Glesnes steps up too early to challenge a ball, doesn't get it, falls right into the lap of Surridge, who makes a great run, some great cutbacks, scores in the goal. Nashville looked pretty good under BJ Callahan so far this season. Okay. How about LA Galaxy 1 point in 4 matches? Are you worried about them yet?
Um, Again, I think it's just uh, the 1 point is worrisome. I get that they've got injuries. I think there becomes a point, Jordan, where it is a must worry. It's not just Ricky Pooge
Mm-hmm.
disappearing off your team. Like 1 point in 4 matches, that's brutal. I mean, this is like the flip opposite when you're talking about perfect teams. You got to do the same thing for the 1 point teams. Like if this extends 2 more weeks, Jordan, you're in some really sketchy territory because you're starting to get into this like where you only collect 1 point here, 1 point there. And I mean, people are missing the playoffs by a point, Jordan. And this team only has 1 point in 4 matches. I mean, that becomes an issue. It's more than just one player. You can't, this is not sustainable. So, yes, I would say I am concerned. They're just not playing good football. It was a late goal yesterday that saved them. So, again, like they would be on 4 matches with 0 points. And I think anybody around the league, yes, we can say that Ricky Puig is coming back, and that's part of the slow start. Yes, Paintstill's coming back. That's part of this, but eventually that slow start becomes too monumental and it becomes too big for them to try to overcome. I'm worried. I'm not like panicked worried, but yes, I would say that I'm worried if I'm an LA Galaxy fan.
I'm not worried still. I feel like, look, I mean, are there chances of winning MLS Cup lower now? Yeah. I don't even think they were going to win it anyway. I would be. This might actually be what they need. They need to probably restructure this team a bit. They probably have to offload Marco Royce as we look into next season and stuff. So that makes it a little easier when your team does lose and doesn't, like, let's say they missed the playoffs. It's a little easier to move on from certain people and then keep the core components instead. But we'll see. I'm sure that the GM does not think the way I am, and that Will is out there trying to make this team better to get them healthy and maybe sign some new players. Hernan Lopez out 3 to 4 months for the Quakes. That is their latest DP. Last year, he signed with them, but yeah, he is out 3 to 4 months, right shoulder surgery. Hopefully, I'm not joining him in that line, but I'm looking at what might be the timeline for me. 3 to 4 months. Okay, now I know. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. There you go. At least Jordan knows. So
Okay, let's before we talk about the roster for the Nations League, let's get some more MLS stuff out of the way here. Player of the week. They announced who that was. We voted for him as one of our names. Awuase. Awuase. There we go. I wrote it down for me. Is from Minnesota, scored 2 goals, wins player of the week. Usually, if you score 2 goals or 3, depending on who else is above you in that list, you're winning player of the week, it seems. Player of the match day. And goal of the week. Now, this is something I wanted to bring to us here. What would your goal of the week be? Because I'll tell you mine here. Mine is the Hassani Dotson goal from that same game, which Minnesota had a 3-0 lead on and choked it away to one of the worst teams in the West, as Minnesota continues to be a team that is very flip-flop heavy here.
yeah.
But just a rocket of a goal from Dotson. Who do you have, or what do you have as goal of the week?
Yeah, this one was kind of a cheap shot, but like I had to do it. It's definitely the Messi goal. He brings a ball down in front of a defender, and I'm talking like in like close proximity to like me to this mic, and he like somehow cuts the defender. The defender gets totally lost, and then all of a sudden he's able to bring it back down and then chip it up over Guzan, who's a really good goalkeeper, and just made it look like it was the most effortless thing he's ever done in his life. And I know he's made a lot of those kind of things, but like just watching this in slow motion, I was just like, how could he possibly have done that? Like, there's nobody in this space that would have been able to create a goal out of that. So it was incredible. I was going to do the Martino Hayda. I was going to be a homer because I thought that was a fantastic goal. It was a smashing strike, but I was just like, I
The
don't think I've
Lukic
ever
goal?
seen his skill.
Lukic
The
goal was
Lukic
pretty
goal was
good.
it was very good on a volley for him to be able to keep it, and it was straight, Jordan. It wasn't like it did that knuckleball thing. It was just like, zoom. So
But no,
there's a lot of good goals this
there
week.
was. The Messi goal was really good.
Yeah.
Just a lovely finish. You know what was really, really good highlight for me? I think it was caught offside or he just shot it wide, but it is one where he brought it down in the second
Yes.
half and then
Yep.
does like this spin move to try to
Yep.
take a shot off. And it does. He does get a shot off that was dangerous. And I'm like, wow.
It was the one Guzan looked at and went, "Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yep."
Yeah,
I know
just
exactly
like
which
the
one you're talking
movement
about.
and being able to bring it
Yes.
down and then do the spin, like he knew exactly where the goal was. It was great.
Next time you're watching Brad Guzan, everybody listening to this podcast, tell me I'm not wrong when saying this. When you watch Brad Guzan, when he gives up a goal, it looks like somebody has shot him dead straight in the head, and he just goes, and he like falls. I was like, "What is he doing? Why does he do
Trying to
that?"
get a
Next
SAG
time you're watching,
card, man. He wants
yeah,
to go into he's going to be retiring soon. He's got to prepare that
he's
next
one of
job.
my favorite keepers to watch because he's so animated.
Yeah.
Like the stuff he does, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, okay, next time you're watching, anytime somebody scores on him, just watch him. He just does this like he's being petrified, and then he just like looks like he's being shot in the head. It's great. It's wonderful.
The rest of the week, New York, Orlando finished 2-2. Toronto lost to Chicago 2-1. Austin beat LAFC 1-0. Charlotte beat Cincy 2-0. DC and Montreal finished 0-0, which was one of my shame of the week picks. But I said I'm not going to do DC dirty that way and went with Chicago, Toronto, which actually outlived the hype here. NYCFC beat New England 2-1 as Caleb Porter cannot buy a win. SKC in Minnesota, like I said, 3-3. Vancouver 1-0 over Dallas. RSL 2-1 over Houston. St. Louis 1-0 over Seattle. San Diego keeps it going 1-1 with the Crew. Colorado beat San Jose 2-1. Sunday's games, Nashville beat Philly 3-1. Portland, LA 1-1. And Miami beating Atlanta 2-1. As we go to our next segment here, game of the week. And just for everybody to know, we have Open Cup games Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the U.S. Soccer YouTube channel. So make sure you check those out. Of course, none of the MLS teams are in it yet. So not a lot of the big matchups at this time, but still some really good, fun local matches. Westchester United SC versus Loudoun United. That's kind of a closer battle for me to go see if I wanted to, but that's a Tuesday night. Can't really get up there. Okay. Saturday, 2:30, Cincinnati and Atlanta at TQL. Then we have Minnesota LA Galaxy at 4:30, Charlotte San Jose at 7:30, Columbus NYCFC, New York Red Bulls Toronto, Orlando DC, Philadelphia versus St. Louis. SKC and LAFC kick off the 8:30 matches. Nashville and Montreal. 9:30 is Colorado Portland, RSL Dallas. 10:30 Seattle Houston, Vancouver Chicago. Sunday night soccer, I guess, is going to be at 4 p.m. with Austin San Diego. This is a mistake. The game should always be 7 o'clock on Sunday night soccer. I feel like that's just, unless there is no Sunday night soccer and this is just a Sunday game on Season Pass.
Yeah, I think I honestly do think they're scheduling it around the NCAA tournament.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know why. I think, yeah, because the next round would be the Saturday, Sunday. So maybe that's what they're doing. They don't want to compete. But then they're going to be playing all day Saturday, too.
Yeah,
so
it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I don't know.
I just feel like you had momentum of 4 straight weeks
You
of
did.
Sunday night soccer, and you're like, we're taking this one off,
Yeah.
or we're going to a different time. It's kind of odd.
Especially when it's a central time zone. Like, that's only 3 o'clock.
Yeah, so
Austin
putting it
time
at 7
would only mean it would be at 6.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
feel
a
like
big
that makes
difference.
sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Weird.
Oh, well, let's go to game of the week and shame of the week here, as I'm going to give you my game of the week as Charlotte San Jose. Buying into Charlotte, San Jose has been fun, but they've kind of stumbled in the last game here. Had a little bit of problems in the game before that as well. But this game is in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium, Bruce Arena versus Dean Smith. I don't know. New look San Jose versus a rising Charlotte team. I think this is going to be a really fun match.
I'll pick your game since you didn't pick yours. I'll pick this St. Louis City SC against Philadelphia at Subaru Park. That's a number 2 in the Eastern Conference going against the number 3 in the Western Conference. Jordan,
Pretty good one.
St. Louis has yet to give up a goal, and Philly has scored a lot of goals. So a lot of contrasting styles here to be played. Bradley Carnell.
Yeah, the Carnell Derby. Yeah.
It's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that one. I think the Union get a nice win here, bounce back from that loss against Nashville.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I think that's going to be a lot of fun in that weekend. How about shame of the week here? I'll give you mine since I usually let you go first. I have, sorry Toronto versus Red Bulls. These are both very bottom of the East teams. New York is in 10th place. Toronto's in 15th. Uh, New York can barely score. They have 4 goals on the year. Toronto has 5 goals on the year, but give up 10. Right? New York doesn't usually give up a lot of goals. They've only given up 3 all season. I feel like it's going to be a low scoring game with just really bad soccer. Is kind of what I'm getting from this one.
Yeah, this is always hard because it's like, do you let one team really identify how bad this is going to get? As far as the matchup. You know what? I'm gonna play it that way. I'm gonna go ahead and say that my shame of the week is going to be Minnesota versus LA Galaxy. LA
Mm.
Galaxy look awful to start the season. They'll now travel to Allianz Field to play a Minnesota team. LA Galaxy, Jordan, give up so many goals, and Minnesota seems like that type of team that could score in bunches. So I don't know. I feel like this is going to be a really bad matchup with the Galaxy, but there's that off chance also that Minnesota shows up and doesn't really do anything either. So
Yeah,
I'm
like
thinking
they
like
take a
this could be one of
3-0
those.
lead and
Yeah,
then
it's
they
like a
blow it again
yeah,
against one of the
or it's
worst
like just
teams.
a lot of shots on goal and nobody scores, like a
Yeah.
0-0 draw. Like this feels like 0-0 draw territory. So I'm gonna go with them. Galaxy look awful.
All right. U.S. men's national team roster for the Nations League here. We have some goalkeepers, Patrick Schulte, Zach Steffen, who's in form, Matt Turner. Defenders, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Marlon Fossey, Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Anthony Robinson, Joe Scally, Austin Trusty. Midfielders, we have Tyler Adams, Johnny Cardoso, Diego Luna, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Tanner Tessman. Forwards, Patrick Adjamon, Yunus Musa, Kristen Pulisic, Josh Sargent, Timothy Weah, Brian White. Shocking name there, right?
That's fun.
Yeah, what's your take on the roster? I feel like if Greg put this one out, people would have been really upset because I did see people really upset about Brian White getting called in. And who else were they really upset about? They were upset about Adjamang getting called in as well.
So I've been watching Ajamong. I've for some reason have tuned into quite a bit of Charlotte FC soccer. Um, Jordan, he looks really good. I'm actually really impressed with him. I'm excited for that one more so than Brian White. I get the Brian White thing. It's kind of like the Brandon Vasquez thing, where he's just had so much success in this league, and he's always seems to be in good form. Why not, right? Like have him as a bench option, or maybe he gets a game here or there, or nice sub 30 minutes. Like the dude just knows how to score. It's not like he's going to play over the rest of them. Like that's what's
Mm-hmm.
hilarious to me. Depth is depth. Jordan, what if he does come out and he's a world beater? What if Ajamong comes in and he scores 2 goals? Like then you know that you got something. Ajamong, I honestly do think that he is set up for a better future somewhere else. It's just a matter of when does he get there. And I think with Dean Smith at the helm in Charlotte, I'm just really impressed with his ability. And he's so big. Like that's something that we really liked with DK was because he was such a fortress of a striker. It's the same kind of success Josie had because he was so big. I really do think Ajamong is that type, but faster. So I actually really do like this pick. I think this is an excellent, and this is Mauricio Pochettino. This isn't like it's Greg Berhalter going out there deciding it. This is somebody who's been well versed in all things world soccer. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think people are going to give Pochettino a little bit more of a leash here, but I just think it is funny that you know,
Yeah.
people still get upset about him picking MLS players, which is his prerogative. We play Panama on March 20th. That's in 3 days. That's Thursday. Dang. And then, of course, the final or third place game, but let's not act like that actually exists. Let's just say we're going to be in the final March 23rd. That is Sunday. That might be why there's no Sunday night soccer. That might be
Yeah.
why. They probably
I can
wanted
see that.
to,
US Federation be like, no, no.
or like, hey, are people going to watch this game when the U.S. is maybe in a
Yeah.
final?
Yeah.
Probably not, right? So, okay. That makes more sense. I kind of forgot Nations League was this week. But yeah, so we have the roster out: USA versus Panama. That's where you would probably see one of those players make an appearance if needed. But I would think most likely, like Brian White and Ajaman are going to be break the glass in case of emergency or just be there for the camp, because I do think you're probably going to have Josh Sargent be the starter, or Timothy Weah. Like those are probably who you're leaning more towards there, up top. And then the final, we're going to be playing either Mexico or Canada if we get past Panama. That rhymed. I didn't mean for it to, but those are just the nations.
Panama's been a thorn in our side, so it should be a good match.
Heck, I don't want USA versus Canada with everything going on. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'd get booed, rightfully so.
Would we? It's in California.
That's fine. Yeah, well,
so
Jordan,
maybe, yeah, maybe.
Get booed there and then anywhere else, I'd be more than happy if they booed us. I don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it. I'm excited. It's been a while since we've seen the real U.S. men's national team first squad. So
as opposed to the fake one,
as opposed to the cupcake. But no, I'm excited. I love this, Timey, and like you and I talked about last episode, I cannot believe the World Cup's next year. So just blows my mind.
Nations League, we're the only team that won it still, so let's keep that rolling, right?
Let's go. Keep that trophy home.
Okay, so because I want USA Canada, it probably means Panama Mexico is going to be the final.
Yeah, absolutely.
At Stateside Show on all of our social medias, or you can comment in the comments below here with any of your thoughts on the U.S. men's national team, the roster drop, or any of the topics we talked about today. Anything else before we head out?
No, well, I guess if you're listening to this and you're not on the YouTube version, because you're probably, Jordan, I don't think you're releasing them similarly as you are on YouTube. If you somehow missed an episode, or you want to hear a specific part, Jordan's been doing a good job of clipping. So there's been different clippings of our past episodes that we've kind of taken down into chunks. And Jordan's been able to edit those and put them up on YouTube. So if you want to hear, I'm assuming debates about Lionel Messi and what he means to MLS and everything else like that, make sure to go over and follow us on YouTube, because we got some good content there. And I know we're going to record some more stuff.
We still have our kit tier lists that we're going to do here with the way that we rank them, whether wait for Ross, purchase now, right? All that kind of stuff. So we got those coming up over the next coming weeks, and then so we'll see how it goes. But thank you all for watching and listening along with us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time when we talk about, did the USA win the Nations League? Are they on a roll? And then all of these MLS results that are coming up.